Welcome to the Worthy Initiative podcast, where healing meets truth and hope takes root. I'm Jim Plasky, a family nurse practitioner, trauma survivor, and the founder of the Worthy Initiative.
And I'm Brittany Brandt, a lifelong learner, trauma survivor, and co-host. Together, we explore what it really means to reclaim your worth through real stories, honest conversations, and the kind of insight that only comes from walking through the fire yourself.
Here we talk about the climb, the messy, powerful process of healing and rediscovering who you are underneath the survival.
Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe that you are more than what broke you.
This podcast is not meant to replace medical advice or professional counseling. It's a conversation rooted in lived experience, clinical understanding, and the shared belief that healing happens when we stop hiding our pain.
Because you are not what hurt you, and your story isn't over.
Welcome to the Worthy Initiative podcast. Today, we want to talk a little bit about who we are, why we chose to do this, and what our listeners can expect.
Absolutely.
I'm Jim Plasky. I'm a family nurse practitioner, trauma survivor. I'm a local business owner of Revitalize Health and Wellness. And a lot of my initiation for this was just how do we recognize trauma? How do we express trauma? But then how do we learn what are better coping mechanisms for it?
Absolutely. And I am Brittany Brandt. I own 2B Consulting Co., a marketing agency that does website design, social media, digital advertising, etc. And, for me, it's my life experience has really kind of led up to where I am today. Healing doesn't start when the pain stops. It is a process, and it takes a lot of work. And I think a lot of healing does happen in group settings or in community. And we just wanted to provide a platform for that.
Creating a community and an avenue where we can have shared discussions, hear other guests and their stories, but then also explore where we have come on our journey and how we can help even just one listener. This podcast is an honest look at trauma from a lived experience, but then also from some clinical insights and my background as a nurse practitioner. But I think it's important for us to discuss some of the things that we anticipate or what we would like to see for our listeners or viewers out there.
Absolutely. And I think, something to keep in mind for our listeners is that these are going to be real, raw, honest conversations and stories from our life and, things that we've experienced. And so some of it may be very triggering to some people, and just to kind of be aware.
Yeah. And that's a great point. There's going to be times, even when I'm listening to podcasts, right, that I anticipate something's coming and I'm not quite ready for it. So I need to hit that fast forward button, and that's okay. Not every episode needs to be listened to in order, but it's more of a collection of lived experience and different growth along the way.
Absolutely. And not everyone will be super heavy either. Some episodes will share just insights in general, practical tips, and, well-being information in general. So.
And any time that we are going to be getting into any heavy topics, we'll make sure we let you know and give you a heads up at the beginning of each episode, but then also in the notes for the episodes.
Yeah.
So what is the Worthy Initiative? I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. The Worthy Initiative isn't a brand, it's more of a pathway. And a lot of this was driven from a book that I'm working on about my own memoir, my own self-help guidance, and the different tools that I wish I would have had when going through it. And that's one thing that we have in common. Yeah. Brittany also is working on a book, and throughout our many discussions together, I think we aligned on a lot of our story, our pathway, and where we want to go with this initiative.
Yeah, it just really kind of fell together that we were both, kind of writing our stories into books, and then we've been working together for over almost a year now, and some marketing things, and just kind of chatting about business, and just realized that, we do have a lot in common, and there's probably a lot of value that we could share just by having real conversations.
And the Worthy Initiative, it's taking the traditional journey of trauma survival and putting it through not only clinical support, but more or less, what does this look like from a lived experience?
Right.
And redoing that, I don't want to call it necessarily a training module, but redoing that entire concept behind what works, what didn't work for us. And it may not be the right fit for everybody.
Right.
Everybody's going to heal a little bit differently. So nothing that we say is locked in stone that we anticipate you want to do X, Y, and Z, but it's all about identifying that you were in survival mode. And then what does the work look like to get you past that? And and I think that was the biggest concept that it took a while for me to realize. I could not change what happened to me.
Right.
But when I'm aware of that trauma response, I now get to own what my recovery, what my survival, what my next chapter looks like.
Yeah. And I think it's important to just remember that everyone's journey is different. And so our journeys may look very different than someone else's. And, there's no correct way to go through any of this. But I think, a couple of things that are going to be really important that we do touch on are how to reclaim your voice, how to have boundaries, how to, work with shame and what that feels like. And, just letting go of some of the expectations when it comes to trauma or generational things that have happened. And
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We all have some form of generational guilt or generational influence there. And what does that look like in our daily lives, and how do we overcome it? So this platform is just an avenue for us to have those open discussions. There's a ton of podcasts out there that hit on mental health, but I don't think any of them are really diving in from the lived experience potential to its fullest. And, that's my goal is, giving people that community where they're like, yeah, I'm not alone. Other people go through the same scenario, and hey, look, they're doing well. I can tell you, I'll be the first one to say that not every day looks this well.
No.
And we fluctuate a lot, and that's normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And not all days do we use all of the tools.
Right.
And some days you will kind of slip backwards a little bit, and something might happen in your life to trigger something that you thought was healed.
Yeah.
And so we're just talking about how to work through some of that, or what we did to work through some of that.
Right. And healing is not linear. There are going to be many times that we loop back to previous states. And, some of our first episodes, we talk about grief and different things that you may be going through the holidays. And all of those components play into the bigger picture of what does my healing journey look like? My healing today isn't going to be my healing next week. There's going to be different tools I'm going to need to utilize.
Absolutely. Yep. And we're still acquiring new tools as we go along. And I don't think there's a official end date to healing.
No,
so
I don't think so.
We are all in this journey together.
I wish there was.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I can't tell you how many different tools and things I've learned in my own journey. I've been sober since 2016 from alcohol, and the things that I started then are completely different than the things that I use now as my tools. And so, I think it's just important to remember that throughout our journey as, someone who struggled with a traumatic childhood and addiction and, various other things as an adult, I have learned different tools. I've, gotten rid of certain tools that no longer served me, that I didn't realize were tools I was using. And so it's just a continuation. And I know, you've probably done the same throughout your journey.
Yeah. And I like the point that you made about there's tools that serve us in the now, but they're not tools that I may keep in my toolkit later.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think we learned along the way too. Even when it started into therapy sessions, I can tell you, I realized I was doing coping mechanisms or tools that were not healthy.
Right.
And so I needed to recognize, and if anybody out there that's listening knows me, that I'm an overachiever in many aspects of my life. And that's a trauma response. A lot of that was trying to hide my childhood trauma and looking for validation.
Right.
And so, what is the next award that I can win? What's the next title that I can obtain? And putting on all these various masks, never acknowledging that little boy that was homeless or that little boy that was going through different abuse situations. So, yeah, that's a great point. There are tools that we use that are not healthy, but there are great tools out there that we're not aware of yet, and they change.
Absolutely. And that self-awareness piece is so important. And that generally doesn't come until, we're a little further into our journeys. And sometimes that piece doesn't ever come from people. And so it really varies depending on person, depending on situation, depending on past experiences, where each person is at and what tools they're going to be able to use.
For sure. And we'll talk about our experiences. And that's a great point to make, that this is my interpretation of events. This is how I have perceived my life to go. There's going to be people that we talk about that may recognize themselves in a story that we're sharing. But again, we're not looking to point fingers. We're not looking to place blame. We are just expressing our own pathway in a way that we want to help heal others.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you said, I think it's really important just to frame that. Like, we're not trying to be disrespectful if, we're talking about another person that is in our story. This is just our story. It's our truth. It's our experience. And it really is with the intention of sharing that so that it can reach other people in a way to help them.
Yeah. And even when we have guests on the show, there are going to be very vulnerable situations and conversations that are being had, that we want to create a safe environment where they feel like they can express themselves, but they can do so in a non-judgment way. Overall, I think our closing message for today is keeping that open mind of healing, that journey that we're all on for survival, but then how do I take it to the next step and take ownership of my healing pathway?
I think, the idea of the podcast is that it's an invitation, right? Not to be perfect, but just to start and to have people that are in your corner and that you can relate to and provide some resources.
Yeah. And it's not you need to do this now. Listen to what we have to say, and maybe a year, maybe 5 years down the road, you can replay it again. And when you're ready for your journey, we're always here to talk.
Absolutely. If anyone has been carrying too much for too long, we just encourage you to subscribe and listen to the upcoming episodes. And we thank you so much for checking us out. And there's a lot more to come.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Worthy Initiative podcast. If today's conversation spoke to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it.
Follow the Worthy Initiative on our socials and subscribe to our YouTube for more stories, live events, and tools for your healing journey.
Remember, healing isn't a destination, it's a climb.
And every step you take matters. You are worthy.